Alright, guys, this is the end of the book. We're going to read chapter 15 and chapter 16, and this is it. You finished the whole book during quarantine. Yay! Alright, let's get started. Chapter 15. I look at the next picture in my hand. It is of an American soldier, white teeth gleaming, smiling into the camera. The night of our uprising, Father and I slept in the hospital complex. All around us were signs of Nazi brutality and viciousness. Body parts floated in bottles, needles filled and ready for use in executions lay neatly on a table. A prisoner who had worked there said the doctors prepared these needles every morning and as the day progressed. Orderlies injected the inmates. Charts showing the results of hideous experiments lay in piles. Everything was orderly and efficient, just like the Nazis themselves. And these men had called themselves doctors. Father's wound was not serious. The bullet had not lodged in the bone, but whizzed through the fleshy part of his arm. The first thing he asked for was a shower. When he was clean, they disinfected the wound and wrapped it in a clean gauze. We found SS rations, white bread, and soup with meat and vegetables. Daniel, Father warned, you may eat only a little. After the diet we are used to, this rich food could make us seriously ill. It was hard to listen, but Father's advice and ingenuity had kept us alive so far, and I figured it would be senseless to get ill now. I found a mirror and looked into it. Who was this tall, gaunt boy with large blue eyes who stared back at me? It was like looking at a stranger. When I woke up the next morning, having slept in a cot by myself instead of with 5 others, I had the most amazing feeling. It was then I realized that I was truly free. I let out a whoop that scared all the others in the room half to death. I couldn't leap up. I was too weak, but I stood and screamed, "We're free! Free!" I hugged my father and everyone else in the room and told my father I would be back to check in on him later. There was something I had to do. What do you guys think that he's going to go do? I think he's going to go try to find someone. Who is he going to go try to find? Rosa, maybe? I ate a bit of bread and took some cheese with me and then started on my way. The camp was filled with men celebrating and with those still dying. Men and boys who were nothing but skeletons shuffled around. I had given away my food before. I had gone far. Bodies lay on the ground. I headed for the camp gate. I had to walk through it, walk out of the camp, to prove to myself that this was all real. I got to the gate and moved through it. The scene before me was beautiful. The camp was on the slope of a mountainside. All around me, hills and woods stretched out in a magnificent panorama. Cherry blossoms were in bud. The grass was a deep green. The birds sang. The wind was warm on my cheeks. I couldn't help but cry. Such a beautiful world, and look what mankind had done to it. I fetched my camera from the studio and spent the next few weeks photographing everything I could. The soldier in this picture was one of the first Americans who arrived at our camp that night. There was such cheering and yelling and celebrating. To everyone in the camp and me, the Americans were the most beautiful sight in the entire world. Some of them cried when they saw what we had endured. All of them emptied their pockets. We were constantly showered with chocolate, gum, cigarettes. They were wonderful. Other pictures are not so pretty. They show walking skeletons, men too weak to survive, who died in the thousands over the next few weeks. They show pits full of corpses and huts filled with dead bodies. They show camp guards on their knees begging to be set free. They whined that they had just been following orders, that they were innocent, even that they had helped Jewish friends. Here is a picture of a farmhouse not far from Buchenwald. Carl had made me part of the militia that ran the camp. We were sent out into the countryside to round up supplies. In the meantime, the Americans trucked in civilians from the area and forced them to witness the atrocities they had condoned, bury the dead, and clean up the camp. Unfortunately, many of the camp continued to die, some from eating too much of the rich food, most because they were too weak to regain their health. The local people actually complained about our taking supplies from them. The local people who for 8 years had pretended that Buchenwald did not exist. I got stronger by the day, and all I wanted to do was go back to Lodz and see Rosa and try to find Erica and Frederick. I found Peter, and we talked about returning to Lodz together. Father, of course, wanted to find Erica, but how? He decided he would go to Lodz with me first, and then we would go to Frankfurt. Perhaps Erica would return to Frankfurt. Perhaps she was still alive. And so here I sit on the train. It is May, and we are on our way to Lodz. I am much stronger now. I am clean and dressed in clothes that are not lice infested. Peter sits beside me, father across the way. We don't talk much. We are all thinking about those we love. Are they alive? Who has survived? How much more suffering is in store for us? I have never before now even entertained the possibility of Rosa's being dead. But of course, she could be. She could have been captured and shot or sent to Auschwitz. Father is thinking that Erica could be dead too, and he is feeling the pain of Mother's death. He had no time to grieve before. Now it seems that as our bodies grow stronger, the pain flows through us and over us, and sometimes we are nothing but pain. Tears come constantly, and when we least expect it. The last few weeks in the camp, when we kept so busy helping in its running, taking part in the celebrations, the concerts, meetings with foreign delegations who suddenly wanted to know all about concentration camps, we had no time to grieve. But now we do, and it hurts. We reach a small town in Poland, and the train comes to a stop. Half an hour before we leave, the car attendant announces. "Come on," says Peter. "Let's stretch our legs." I grab my camera, which is always with me, and we leave the train. We take a deep breath as we stand on the platform and look around us to see if there's a small market where we can buy some fresh fruit. We walk to the edge of the platform. Suddenly, coming from behind the station are four huge Polish farm boys. Of course, Peter speaks perfect Polish, and I understand a fair amount after having lived in Lodz for so long. "What have we got here?" one of them says. "Two Jews who escaped the gas?" I know we are in serious trouble. Even if we were both fit and healthy, these lads could make mincemeat out of us. In our present condition, we don't stand a chance. I start to back away, but one of them grabs Peter, and before I can do anything, he punches him hard in the stomach. People from the train are milling around, but no one comes to our aid. Stop it! I scream, lunging at the one who threw the first punch. One of the thugs grabs me. Another punches me hard across the jaw. My whole head is ringing and I slump forward only to be punched in the stomach. Peter is on the ground and I can see that they are kicking his head. Help us! I cry, but no one moves. I try to get loose from the grip of my captor, but I can't, so I go limp and pretend to fall unconscious. Peter is being hit mercilessly. The two who were busy with me go to beat him as he continues to struggle. He is calling them names. You Nazis, you pigs! I reach into my inner pocket and put my hand on my gun. I had resolved at the camp never to be a victim again. I roll over, take out the gun, and fire at one of the thugs. He clutches his leg and drops. I get up to my knees. Another one looks like he is going to come after me. Come on, I scream. I want to shoot you, you murderers. I want to. They began to back off. Father comes pushing his way through the crowd, and finally a policeman approaches. Get this man to a hospital, I scream at the policeman. Peter is bleeding from the head, the mouth. He is unconscious now, barely breathing. The policeman runs over to the Pole who is shot in the leg. Not him, I scream, but they don't care. They've murdered us all, and they still hate us. And it still isn't enough. It is never enough. Get him help, I scream, now, or I'll shoot every single person here, and I mean it. The policeman runs. Soon he is back with a doctor. The doctor takes in the scene and kneels by Peter. He feels his pulse, looks at his head. It is bad, he said. There is probably internal bleeding. There is nothing I can do for him here. You'll have to take him to the hospital in Lodz. Maybe they can help. But that's 2 hours away, Father protests. I can bind his head wounds, that's all, the doctor replies. He needs an operation. I feel like killing them all. To die now? Like this? After it's all supposed to be over? I hear a scream. It's one of pure anguish, pure anger, pure suffering. It is coming from me. Father comes over to me. Daniel, we'll take him on the train. That's all we can do. I point the gun at the 3 remaining thugs, who now look worried. After all, crazy people shoot. Carry him into the train, I order, my voice shaking, and if you drop him, I'll shoot you through the heart. They carry him onto the train, and in time, the train pulls out. Peter is stretched across 2 seats. I sit on the floor beside him and hold his hand and talk to him. Don't die now, Peter. Please. Perhaps your brother is waiting for you. Perhaps even your father and mother. You mustn't give up hope. You mustn't. He can't die, I say to myself. He can't. Not now. It seems to take forever to get to Lodz. Finally, we arrive. The conductor has ordered ahead for an ambulance. Father and I ride with Peter to the hospital. It is crowded, but they attend to him quickly and take him into the operating theater. We wait for hours. When the surgeon comes out, he speaks to us bluntly. The boy suffered internal damage. We sewed him up where we could, but he's lost a lot of blood and he's very weak. The head injury is severe. He's in a coma and we don't know if he'll come out. We have to find his family, I say to Father. Father nods. If he has any family left. Chapter 16. Doctor, a nurse calls. It's the young boy from surgery. I'm afraid we're losing him. Excuse me, says the doctor, turning to follow her. Please, I beg, let me see him. All right, the doctor agrees. Come with me. Father and I follow the doctor into the intensive care ward where Peter lies. I hurry over to Peter and hold his hand. It is cold, and then he opens his eyes and stares into mine. Find my family, he whispers. Tell them. I will, Peter, I promise. You go to Palestine for me. I will. Remember. And then he sighs and closes his eyes. The nurse listens to his heart and feels his pulse. She shakes her head. I sink down to the floor and weep. I cry. I cry as if my heart will break, not just for Peter, for all of us, left without our families, without a country to live in, left alone and broken to somehow carry on with our lives. Father comes and puts his arms around me. I cling to him like I am a baby, my head on his chest, sobbing. Finally, he pulls me up. I'll stay here, he says. This boy will have a proper funeral, he vows. He won't be thrown into a nameless grave. I'll arrange it somehow, and I'll go to the authorities to see if we can locate any of his family. In the meantime, I think you have someone you want to find. I nod. We'll meet back here at the front entrance at 6 o'clock, Father says. I nod again and make my way out toward the street. Oh my gosh, that's so sad. I can't believe Peter survived all of that and then dies because of some bullies. All right. I don't know the city of Lodz. I knew only the ghetto, so I must ask directions. At Buchenwald, we were given free train passes for travel to find relatives, and they gave us some cash for our journey. I stop a young man on the street and ask him for instructions on how to find what used to be the ghetto. The streetcar takes me right up to where the old barbed wire gates had been. I remember so well looking at these streetcars from the ghetto, especially when we used to cross the wooden bridge over the streetcar tracks. The Nazis didn't even want Jews walking on the same street Christians used, so they had built the footbridge over it. I remember a young German soldier who used to stand at the foot of the bridge and take pot shots at Jews hurrying to and from work, efficiently killing all those he fired on. Where is he now, I wondered? Safely at home with his family? The murder of his innocent victims to go unpunished? As I walk down the streets of the ghetto, I look around. I look around and feelings wash over me. Memories. Remember had been Peter's last word. How will I ever forget? Once in the ghetto, I know where to go. My heart is beating quickly. Would she have been able to leave me a note? The streets are not packed with people as they once were, but you can see that poorer Poles have moved back into these apartment buildings. Perhaps people live in our old apartment. Perhaps. And then I see her. She is sitting in front of the apartment building on a small folding chair, reading a book. Her flaming red hair gleams in the sun. She is Rosa, and yet she is not. She is slim, but not as skinny Oh, but not the skinny wife I once knew. Her face has a healthy glow underneath her freckles. I stop and stare at her. I can't move. I am too overcome. She is alive. She is healthy. She is the most beautiful person in the entire world. Suddenly, she drops her book, turns her head, and looks directly at me as if an angel had whispered in her ear, "He's here. He's here." She stands, knocking over the chair, and then she runs. She is not smiling. She looks worried, as if she's not sure if it's really me. I can't seem to move. I'm frozen to the spot. She reaches me, stops inches away, and looks up into my face. Slowly, gingerly, she raises her hand, and her slim, cool fingers touch my cheek, my lips, and then I close my hands over hers and bend my head down until our lips touch and my arms are around her and I hold on to her and she to me and we are both crying. And then I pick her up and swing her in the air and we are both laughing. And then she speaks. "These dreadful people took over your apartment, and they wouldn't even let me leave word for you with them. But I barged in and got your stuff from the cupboard, and so every day for the past 3 weeks, I've come here with my chair and a good book, and I've waited because I knew you'd come back. I just knew it." And she kisses me. "You look wonderful," is all I can think of to say. "So do you," she replies. "You're so tall. How did you manage to grow?" "It was all that nettle soup they fed us," I answer. Little did they realize that it was just chock full of vitamins and minerals and everything. She laughs. Her laugh rings out, and I feel as if it is spreading in ever widening circles, and it will soon cover the entire continent. "I love you," she says. "I love you too," I answer. And suddenly, we don't know what else to say. There is so much to tell, but how much pain in the telling? We are reluctant to break this spell of pure happiness. She runs back to fetch her book and the chair. I take the chair from her. "My white knight," she teases. "Always at your service, my lady." "Come," she says, "let's go out of here." My pleasure. It is a beautiful spring day, clear and mild. Rosa takes us on a street cart to a large park. We stroll down the paths hand in hand until finally we sit on a bench. The bench has a sign that reads, "No Jews allowed." We sit. "We can't stay here," I say to her. "There is no place for us here anymore." Rosa takes my hand. "Palestine?" she says. "Yes," I replied, and then hesitate before I add, "if you'll come with me." "Is this some kind of proposal?" she says. I sink to my knees in front of her. "If you'll have me, if you could, if you would." "Yes," she says. I leap up and shout out to those around, "She said yes! We are to be married!" An old lady walking by stops and says, "God bless you. You deserve some happiness now." "Thank you," I say. "Sit down, Daniel," Rosa says. "I have to tell you something." I sit. I know by the tone of her voice that this is bad news and hard to tell. "It's about Erica." I catch my breath. "I saw her." "You saw her? But where? How?" "I started visiting the displaced persons camps looking for you. As you know, all the camps have compiled lists of the people in them. Plus, they have a master list with the names of people from other camps at Waldenburg. I saw her name. She was in the infirmary. She was very ill, Daniel." "Go on," I urge. "She was happy to see me. She'd been marched to Gross Rossen and had hidden in the infirmary the day they evacuated the camp. She simply refused to die until the Russians came and she was liberated. But then she had no more strength. I held her hand and sat with her, Daniel. I didn't leave her. I stayed with her until she died. She wanted so much to know what had happened to you and your father. Then she pauses and looks at me, almost afraid to ask. I swipe at my tears. Oh my God, crying. Father's alive. He's here in Lodz. Thank God, she says. And she adds, I do have some good news. Frederick made it through. He's living with us now, part of the family, really. Your family, I say? What happened? My father was killed early in the war, she says. We found out just a few weeks ago, though. My older brother and my mother and I, we were liberated by the Russians on January 19th. 3 long months hiding in a cellar. Your little brother? She shakes her head. Typhus. He caught it while we were in hiding, and we couldn't help him. By the time the Russians came, he was too weak and dehydrated to survive. But to have 3 members of your family alive now, why, Daniel, it's practically unheard of. We're so fortunate. So many are the only ones left. Entire families are gone. She pauses. I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that millions of Jews were killed. Millions. And each one a mother or a sister like Erica or a brother like Peter. I put my head in my hands. How will we have the strength to carry on, I say? We will do it for all those that couldn't, she replies firmly. We will name our children after those murdered, and we will go to Palestine and help build a country. We will dedicate our lives to making sure this can never, ever happen again. I look at her. I take her hand. We get up and walk together, and I know that love is a precious, precious thing, and I know that I am lucky, despite everything, to be with Rosa today. Still, I will keep my pictures and I will tell my story, because if we forget, we will once again be defenseless. We will be defenseless against evil. If we forget how bestial, how brutal these school teachers, these doctors, these professors, these clean, upstanding citizens became, if we forget, then we too could become that way. And so we shall have to learn to stop these evils before they gain power and it is too late. I put my arm around Rosa and hold her tight as we walk. And for a moment, I am content. Valentina. All right, guys, that's the end. I'm sorry. My kids are acting a fool.